So the main thing that's new in SharePoint Server 2013 is there's a brand new workflow platform. So the old one's still there. So the old one that ran SharePoint 2010, that ran on Windows Workflow Foundation 3.5, that's still there. You can still use that. However, there's a lot of benefits to using the new platform. It's a completely redesigned workflow infrastructure. It's powered by WF4, Windows Workflow Foundation 4. Like I said, the 2010 workflows are still supported, but there's no new functionality added. And I don't know if those will be supported going forward or not. So I recommend using all your new workflows on the new platform, designing them all on the new platform. If you have old workflows, that's fine. They'll still run. But if you're building new workflows, I recommend using the new platform. So some of the things that are nice about the new platform is that the workflows that you do are fully declarative, so there's no code authoring environment. Now, that might seem like you might not be able to do things that you thought you could do, but because of all the improvements in SharePoint 2013, especially with the APIs being exposed as web services, pretty much anything that you would have to do before using custom code, you can just build a web service, and you can call that web service from your declarative workflow. There's lots of SharePoint Designer enhancements. There's lots of new actions that have been added that we'll take a look at. The workflow manager capabilities are very nice. Probably one of the biggest things is that it's hosted on a separate server. It actually has its own farm. It's a workflow farm, and so what that means is it's not going to bog down SharePoint. It's not going to bog down your farm. It doesn't run under the OWS timer service anymore, obviously. So you don't have to worry about a workflow crashing the timer. That's going to mess everything else up in SharePoint. Again, a huge capability is being able to call web services and being able to digest data coming back from web services. And again, if you need to, you can actually call in 2010 workflows. You can initiate 2010 workflows if you need to for interop. So you might be thinking, okay, well, why would I want to use 2013 workflows? Seems like a pain. We can just do things the old way and everything will just work. Well, maybe if you have some really simple SharePoint Designer workflows or some out-of-the-box workflows, maybe that's fine. But if you have more complex workflows, you want more extensibility, you want to be able to change things without having to touch the SharePoint server, then 2013 is the way to go. Some of the main differences is obviously 2013, it doesn't have to, but it can run on a separate server, which is independent from the SharePoint farm. Now, in my development box, I have everything going on the same server, so it's possible to do it on the same server. 2010 workflows, if you weren't using SharePoint Designer, those require custom assemblies. Basically, if you had anything complicated, you need to do things like looping or anything like that, you would write your workflow in Visual Studio and use the correct actions, maybe even using just like pure code, possibly. But you can't use custom code in 2000 workflows. It's just XAML only. That might seem like a disadvantage, but it's actually a good thing because it prevents bad code from being put on your servers. So the whole mantra of SharePoint 2013 is the team did as much as they can, so you don't have to put things physically on your SharePoint server farm. Because in a lot of organizations, that's off limits to developers anyway. So they're just kind of making this easier. Also, with 2010 workflows, there's a lot of workflow knowledge required, especially with Visual Studio. You really you had to know quite a bit just to get a really simple workflow going. But with 2013 workflows, there's a really large activity set. You have very flexible flow control. It's a much easier environment to do workflows in. Also, performance and scalability implications on the 2010 side, because you're running in the timer service, could potentially bog down the server. Whatever server's running could bog it down, could interfere with other, if something crashed the SP timer process or the OWS timer process, then you crash the processes for everything, and that all the timer jobs running on that machine, or possibly even the whole farm. So It's not good. Now with 2013 workflows, it's really just an extension of the cloud app model. So you can run safely in the cloud or on premises at scale. So you might be wondering, okay, how in the world is that possible? How can it run somewhere else? Well, it's because of the API that SharePoint exposes. So when SharePoint 2013 workflows run, anytime they communicate with SharePoint, they're calling web service. They're calling the WCF web services that SharePoint has, or the REST web services, whatever endpoint it decides to use. It's probably calling the REST endpoint, but regardless, it's calling in to SharePoint via web services. Another comparison point with 2010, 2013. 2010 wasn't resilient to failure. So if you had a workflow running and the machine it was running on went down for some reason, well, then you lost that workflow. But in 2013, it's highly resilient. A workflow, if something bad happens, that workflow will be paused. So if there's an outage, then that workflow will just be paused, and then it'll resume when the system starts up again. Now, one thing some people may not like, or may actually like a lot, is InfoPath forms. So InfoPath forms, they're going away, actually. They're going to be replaced by something new. We don't know yet, but they are going away. And so in 2010 workflows, you could use InfoPath forms. And InfoPath is a great product for building really nice, rich forms, data input forms. The only problem is they're really pain to deploy, especially when you want to deploy them as part of a workflow. It's just they're very difficult to work with as far as deployment. With 2013, it's just simplified. You just use ASP.NET forms. So Workflow Manager, again, like I said before, is completely independent of the SharePoint farm. And the way this works is it's exposed in SharePoint as a service application proxy. So when SharePoint needs to communicate with it, it goes through that service application proxy, and then it's calling the exposed web services of Workflow Manager. And it actually uses the Windows Azure Service Bus, and it's mediated by OAuth. You could take your Workflow Manager farm, and you could stand it up on Windows Azure if you want. You could use, or you could create your own virtual machines in Azure. You could do whatever you want. You can make the whole thing live up in the cloud if you wanted to, even though you have an on-premise SQL Server installation. But again, the communication back and forth is through web services. And it's multi-tenancy, high density. You can handle tons of transactions, and very resilient. So you can scale it, especially if you put this up in the cloud, you're using Azure, you can scale it as high as you want. It's resilient, so if the machine you're running on, the system you're running on happens to go down, that workflow isn't lost. It's still there. It'll still pick up where it left off, and there's more. So what we're going to do now is I just want to show you what I had to do to get Workflow Manager running, and it's really pretty simple. So we'll go ahead and take a look at that now. Okay, so I'm back on my SharePoint server machine now. I'm going to go to Central Administration. And to show you where Workflow Manager is at, I'm going to click on Manage Service Applications. And here is my Workflow Service application right here. And so you can see it started. If I go to manage it, there's really not much there. It's basically just saying, hey, SharePoint is connected to the Workflow Manager. So that's pretty much all there is there. And then as far as on the machine where you install it, it installs the service bus and a few other things. And here's the Workflow Manager configuration. And pretty much once it's configured, you can say, okay, I want to leave the Workflow Manager farm. That's if you want to remove this computer from the existing Workflow Manager farm and the Service Bus farm. So the main thing is you just need to download Workflow Manager 1.0. Just do a Bing search, get the latest version of it, download it, install it on whatever machine or machines you want to install it to, and create a farm. But then the most important thing you need to do is join it to your SharePoint farm, you need to make that connection, which will create that service application. And so this is the PowerShell command that you need to use. Register SP workflow service, and then this is the name of the site that's going to be connected to. So it's the root site collection, and then this is the host URI of the workflow manager. So you have to make a note of this when you're installing workflow manager, where it's going to get put. You can just open up IIS on the machine, you'll see it, and this is, it's basically just hosting a bunch of web services. And then make sure this is allow OAuth over HTTP. So that's how the trust is set up between the two services. It passes the OAuth tokens back and forth, so it can authenticate SharePoint, and SharePoint can authenticate Workflow Manager. Okay, so that's just a basic overview of just getting Workflow Manager set up. It's really not that difficult, but that in order to use SharePoint 2013 workflows, you have to have this set up, otherwise you won't even see the option for it.